Hi everyone, and welcome to the Connected Data London 2024 Roundtable. I'm going to quickly introduce you through the agenda. So the plan is we're going to have like a two-part session, broadly speaking. In the first part, we're going to introduce the event and ourselves. There's lots of us here, so this is going to take a while. And after we go through the main themes and the format and this kind of thing, and also the call for submissions, we're going to introduce people one by one, and they're just going to basically do their own intros and share a little bit of an opening statement. Then we have a short break to address any audience questions that we may have. By the way, if you want to add your questions, there's a chat box right there in the bottom right corner, and you can type your questions there. And we'll be keeping an eye on those and passing them on at regular intervals. So, like I just said, we're going to have like a halfway break, which is going to serve that purpose. And then in the second part, basically what's going to happen is that myself and James are going to fade in the background, and we'll pass the torch on to Paco and Amy, who will be moderating the conversation, which is going to be centered around the connected data landscape as it's captured in the call for submissions, and so other resources that we'll be sharing along the way. Welcome, Panos, by the way. Good to see you. So I guess we may as well start, and I'll hand over to you, James, so you can do a little bit of intro and the history of the event, and we'll take it from there to catch up with what's going on today.
Cool. Sounds good. Thanks, George. Can everyone hear me? Okay. First of all, the mic's all right. Brilliant. Yeah. Okay. Great. Brilliant. Well, thanks everyone for coming along today. Really excited about today's session. So yeah, a bit of a kind of recap of the last kind of 8 crazy years of connected dataness. So yeah, I guess first of all, what is connected data? Well, in summary, it's a very broad church of many different technologies and disciplines, but bringing together semantic technologies and AI, graph databases, linked data, taxonomies, ontologies, and everything in between. And I guess what's the kind of underlying thread or commonality that brings all of these things together? Well, it's probably a kind of shared recognition of the importance of the structure and the meaning of metadata data. Sorry, and possibly even a shared love of metadata. I would say for many. So where did Connected Data begin? Well, I co-founded Connected Data London in 2016, and we actually ran our first meetup. I was kind of looking through some old meetup information earlier today, and apparently our first ever meetup was called "What Makes a Linked Data Pattern Interesting," and we had a grand total of 16 people attend that meetup to consume crisps or chips in bowls, as some people would call them, and consume warm beer and have many kind of exciting conversations around the domain that we work within. And I guess we organized this meetup mainly because we were interested in growing a community that were interested in these things in London. And I guess we felt that London was kind of maybe a bit behind other areas of the world in this respect. And then that meetup kind of gradually grew, and we decided to run an event, our first event in 2016. I think from memory we had around 75 people attend that first event. And yeah, as they say, the rest is history. So since then we ran an event every year in person from 2016 to 2019. Doubling pretty much year on year in terms of attendance, up to I think we had around 250 people attend the 2019 event. And similarly, we've continued running the free to attend meetup groups as well. So we've, according to meetup.com, ran over 35 different meetups since then, and pleased to say that that's grown a lot in terms of interest in attendance. We've had many different topics and discussions there, and we were fortunate enough for our last meetups that we held earlier this year at Beamery's headquarters in Old Street. We had over 100 attendees, all interested in the topic of kind of RAG and the benefits that connected data and semantic technologies bring to this new exciting age of LLMs that we all find ourselves in. So it's been an incredibly kind of fast-paced and exciting 8 years. We've had many different speakers at the conferences over the years. We have a really active community, as you can probably see from today's session. And we've had lots of really interesting speakers, from big companies to small companies to specialists, evangelists, generalists, every possible kind of demographic, I guess, active in our space. We've had people like NASA, Google, the Financial Times, Uber, all kind of share all the interesting things that they're doing with graphs and connected data. And it's been a genuine privilege personally to just kind of try and cling on to everything that's been going on there at the edges and kind of keep up. So yeah, we had planned to run our biggest ever conference actually in 2020. So we booked a very prestigious central London venue with 450 person capacity, but sadly the universe had other plans, and a sizable pandemic happened, as I'm sure everyone's aware, and completely changed the world and how we live and we work. So we so sadly Connected Data is an in-person event took a back seat for a few years, but yeah, incredibly excited that we're back and we're running our first kind of in-person event, annual conference later this year, which George will touch on more details around. I'm also incredibly excited to welcome Rose to the team, who's the dedicated event manager for this year's event. He's been doing a fantastic job, particularly working very closely with George on developing the program and the logistics. And I'm sure everyone else will be really excited about the plans that they'll both share a bit later today. So yeah, it's taken us a few years to get back to this. We've also, aside from a global pandemic, we've also had other kind of things that have been keeping us busy in life. Both myself and George have continued to work with graphs and connected data on a day-to-day basis, since that time. So we didn't kind of leave the space and get too distracted. Although personally myself, I had two children, so as probably you can tell from the sizable bags that have appeared under my eyes in recent years. And George relocated to Greece to grow olives, as many Greek people do, apparently, and do various other kind of Greek things that I'm very jealous of. So yeah, really excited to be back, and yeah, I guess just give a personal opinion. I think it's probably been a lot of kind of false dawns, maybe. I mean, I guess I've been working with connected data technology, semantic data technologies, ontologies, and so on since maybe like 2012, and I guess there's always been this kind of false dawn of, well, this stuff is important and people will realize sooner or later, especially big companies, and we've kind of built this excitement and the projections, and it's not necessarily quite happened, but I think at the moment things are quite different. I think LLMs are really kind of making AI a part of everyday life for people, and people it's the garbage in, garbage out paradigm is now front and center, and it's highly visible to people. The problem of hallucinations, even people that were not remotely interested in AI until recently are suddenly aware of this concept of hallucinations and data quality and provenance being an issue. So I think it's a really exciting time for semantic technologies, and particularly kind of knowledge, grounding these things in knowledge bases and ontologies. So I see a lot of excitement ahead. And I think this is perhaps summarized with I was looking for some stats on where kind of market size was going for just one of the technologies that I guess features within this landscape. And it's really impressive at the moment, I think. So in 2019, when we last ran the Connected Data event, the global market size for knowledge graph technology was just under $500 million per year. That had doubled to 0.9 billion by 2023. But it's projected at the moment to reach over around 2.5 billion by 2028. So that's incredible growth, and that is just one technology within the many that we work within. So I think it's incredibly exciting times. And just to say, hugely thankful for such an active, vibrant community, and really excited about the program that we're developing for Connected Data London 2024. So with that, I'll hand over to George to share a bit more about the exciting plans that are in store for the months ahead.
Great. Well, thank you, James. And I just have to add, so that people don't think that all I do these days is, work in my olive grove. I'm also still active in the graph domain. So I wrote a book on personal graphs. I had the good fortune actually of having co-authored it with Ivo Velitskov, who is one of our program committee members and is here with us today. And I keep doing my regular biannual, by now, Year of the Graph newsletter. So I'm still around. I'm not entirely consumed by the olive grove, at least not yet. But thanks a lot for the intro. And it's always good to sort of look back at where we came from, in a way, not just as an event, but also as an industry, as a domain, let's say. And indeed, we've come a long way, and we've grown a lot, and on both dimensions, let's say, on the micro as an event, and also on the macro as an industry. And I think that's sort of reflected in many ways in the event that we're putting together this year, which is hopefully going to be everything we were planning for in 2020, but somehow it never materialized, and more, because there's lots of things that have happened since then, and so we hope it's going to be the biggest and best that we had so far. So all this diversity, when you first sort of introduced what connected data is all about, you touched a little bit on the different areas that we think of as making up what we call connected data. So that traditionally, let's say, you and I come more from the semantics part of the world, let's say. So ontologies, data models, vocabularies, all of that stuff. But we've grown to be more inclusive. So over time, we've also added analytics and graph databases and graph data science and graph AI and all of those things. And that's reflected both in the people that make up the community that puts this event together, and also in the call for submissions. As far as the people go, I'll just let everyone introduce themselves in a while. But let me do my part first, which is I'll quickly take you through the call for submissions, and we're going to see how that reflects this diversity that we talked about. So I'm going to quickly share the link to the call for submissions in the chat here, just in case anyone hasn't seen it yet. And while doing that, I'll take you through it. So what we're looking to present this year is, first of all, applications, use cases, applications of knowledge graphs, graph semantics, graph analytics, the graph data science and AI, graph database and semantic technology, in all the usual places and beyond. The usual places in this case would be pharma, healthcare, and science. This has somehow always been a prime domain for applying these technologies, finance and banking. Likewise, media and publishing, again, traditionally, this has been a very strong field of application. But we're also seeing new domains emerging with more and more applications. There's one that James is very familiar with because this is the one that he's been working on for the last several years. So, environmental, social, and corporate governance. There's security and cybersecurity, intelligence and law enforcement. We have lots of graph analytics applications in those fields, and we expect to see that reflected in our submissions. And also retail, we have a few people working on applications there as well. So in a way, that's something we've always had. But to keep up with the times, let's say, as James also mentioned, we see huge interest, renewed interest actually in graph applications and knowledge graphs specifically, which has come with the emergence of large language models. And actually, we just saw yesterday that Microsoft released the open source code to their previously released, like a few months ago. They published this graph RAG framework that many people have taken up with interest. Some of them were wondering about the code. Now we also have the code. So they're not the only ones, obviously. There are many, many variations to that theme, and many people are using that in their own way with different frameworks. And we see lots of interest in that, and we expect that there will be many people that would like to share ideas or applications on how that has been working out. There's also something which is, in a way, traditional, so data catalogs and semantic layers. But again, we see renewed interest. So I also had the chance recently to have one-on-one with someone from this domain. So it's interesting because when in our field, when we talk about semantics, usually we think of like even formal semantics, so vocabularies and ontologies and that kind of stuff. And that's not necessarily how most people, for example, in BI applications or in data warehouses think about it. So the semantic layer for that crowd means something which can be very, very different from what we know. However, we think that these two worlds may be coming closer together, or at least there's a chance for that to happen. And this is why we thought it would be good to include that in the submissions as well. And we hope we're very curious to see what we receive in this area. There's also uh, innovations that we're looking for in all of those fields. So knowledge graph, graph data science and AI, graph database, and so on. And when I talk about innovation, I think it's probably a good idea, a good point, a good segue for me to explain a little bit about the events format at this point. And that's because we have different tracks that we try to make them cater to different types of submissions. So first of all, the event is going to be a 3-day event. It's going to run on December 11, December 12, and December 13. On December 11, we have what we call masterclasses. So these are basically 2-hour-long sessions, and the idea there is to have one or more instructors teach people hands-on skills that they can actually use in their day-to-day job. So these are like really focused and practical sessions, and we're going to have a full day dedicated to those. And historically, they have been very, very popular and also very, very useful. And so this is why we think it's a good thing to have like a full day only for those. Then comes the main conference day, December 12th, and this is where the notion of track applies. We're going to have 3 different tracks running in parallel. One of those we call the nodes track. So this is a track that is dedicated to mainstream applications, basically. So you can think. Adobe, you can think City, and I'm just naming those names because these are some of this is where some of the speakers that we have already announced are coming from. Or UBS, for example, our good friend Tony Seal, which I'm sure many of you will know, and has been historically a member of this community, has already joined the lineup as well as the program committee. And so this is the first track, the nodes track. We also have something called the edges track, and this is where the innovation is relevant. So for the edges track, we're looking for new ideas, breakthroughs, new research, this type of thing. So not not something that you expect to see applied in in the big enterprises, but something that has worked and is ready to spread its wings. Let's say this is the kind of thing that we're looking for the edges track. And last but not least, we have the educational track, which is what I would probably call like the most experimental aspect of the conference day. So anything that doesn't fit in the other two, to define it quite broadly. So these can be demos, these can be interactive sessions, or these can be anything else that's not mainstream and it's not kind of applied research, let's say. So these are the tracks. And having said that, let me quickly return to the walkthrough of the call for submission. So we have a dedicated theme on graph engines versus graph databases, and that deserves a little bit of explanation because it's more specialized than the rest of the things that I've mentioned so far. So many times out in the wild, we see that this is something that people actually wonder about. So should I be using a graph database, or maybe I can leave my graph shaped data where it is and just use some kind of graph analytical framework to do the analytics that I need? This is a very valid question, and this is why we thought, okay, it's worth elevating that and addressing that explicitly in a call for submission. So if you have experience on making that choice and how it's working in practice, would love to hear from you. Another one is, which is one of my favorites, is around the knowledge graph development life cycle. So as more and more people get involved in building knowledge graphs, and this comes as part of the renewed interest that we mentioned due to LLMs and all of those things, this becomes more and more relevant. So building and maintaining a knowledge graph is not as straightforward as it seems. It's not a one and done thing. Basically, you have to keep uh, you have to keep improving it. You have to keep updating it, and well, at times you may even have to retire parts of it. So there are not that many and not so many explicit, let's say, methodologies on how to do that, and we're really open to seeing how does that works for people out in the real world. This is what we expect to see as this part of the call for submissions is involved. There's another one which is about choosing persistent strategies for knowledge graphs. Again, this is something that we see a lot out in the field. So, graph database, a dedicated graph database is not necessarily the only choice there. We see people using all kinds of strategies, not just in extracting, let's say, in using the data that they may have as a graph, but also in storing them. So again, we're looking to see submissions that in which people share their knowledge and how that works for them. We have abstractions of graphs for human consumption. And this is, again, something that we see in our experience as a really important topic out in the real world. So for many people, graphs and visualization go hand in hand. Actually, for many people, visualization is the first thing that comes to mind when they think of a graph, and there are very good reasons for that. But the problem is that above a certain scale, visualizing graphs starts getting very complicated and not trivial. So there are different strategies in how people can go about that, and this is what we would like to see more about. Let's see what else we have. We would also would like to see what people are doing in terms of open source tooling. So how they're using these tools, how they're tweaking them, potentially how they're contributing new tools. We have temporal and geospatial graphs. This is a bit of a more specialized topic. So how people are going about using graphs for specific temporal and geospatial applications. Hope to see more of that. There is one which is one of my favorites, so personal knowledge management and personal knowledge graphs. And so, in addition to the traditional use of knowledge graphs in enterprise settings or as open knowledge graphs, in the last few years, we've also seen the emergence of knowledge graph solutions and knowledge graph tools for personal use as well. And this is what the book that I mentioned previously is about. And we hope to see more of these segments. There's also the topic of graph-based hardware. There's lots of work in that area, and it's not something that people traditionally think of when we talk about graphs, but we believe it should. We believe they should. There's also graph analytics for blockchain applications, semantic SEO and knowledge graphs, something I know that's close to Andreas's heart here, and also reasoning and neurosymbolic AI, which is a bit of a far out topic, but we still like to include it. But I think I've talked enough, and hopefully I've given you at least an idea of what the call for submissions is about. So I'm going to be slowly passing over the torch here to our community. So first of all, we have together with us Paco Nathan and Amy Hobler, who are two of our co-chairs. Normally, the plan was that Katarina Kari, who's our third co-chair, was going to be with us today, but unfortunately, she got ill, so she couldn't make it. She sends her hello, however, and we know that she'll be with us again soon. So with that, I'm going to pass over to you, Amy and Paco. So you can take over from here and we'll just slowly introduce yourselves and just let us know out of all of these things that you've heard me kind of babble about in the last 5 to 10 minutes. What's the thing that's most exciting for you, and what you're looking forward to the most?
Thank you. I'll just jump in and get started first, I guess, and then hand it over to you, Paco. So I've been in the graph space for, I guess, a little over 10 years, a couple decades in tech in general. So very much commercial focused. So I've worked at companies like Neo4j, Relational AI, Microsoft, Hewlett Packard. So a lot of enterprise background. And at the moment, I am a graph advisor, but I've also started a small community for graph practitioners called Graph Geeks. And that's to bring together people with different disciplines in the graph world. I also do a lot of speaking and writing on graphs. I've authored or co-authored several books, including one on graph algorithms that was published by O'Reilly. As far as this conference, I'm super excited for a couple different reasons. One, I would say, as many of us in the graph space, I think part of the attraction is not just understanding connections, but it seems like people who are fascinated with connections and linked data also really value relationships. And so you meet the nicest people at these different graph conferences, and Connected Data London absolutely shines in that. So I'm just excited that we're having a format, and especially the third day, I'm really excited about, because I think that focus on workshops, there's going to be a lot of interaction. And I would say like your pre-announced or your pre-configured meetings or conversations. I love the idea of a bit of what would I say, creative chaos, maybe, so that we can have discussions. We can bring together, people with very different different opinions. And it's just so hard to do that around a topic like graph because you don't tend to run into, folks like that, every day at the coffee shop. So I'm just excited to kind of bring those people together, get the innovative discussions and get a different pulse on like what's shifting and going on in the space. So one, super excited about the very creative format, creative chaos. That's going to be maybe we should just call that third day the Creative Chaos Day. But anyhow, and part of that excitement is just that everything is shifting so fast right now in the graph world. I'm sure a lot of us have seen, the different news. I have not seen the level of excitement for graphs since in the last 10 years, since I've been interested, that I have now. So a lot of excitement, a lot of shifting. I think there's a lot of focus on a couple areas. Graph and RAG, we could talk about that all day, but I think there's a lot of innovation going on in the graph space that isn't related necessarily to LLMs that we're not hearing about because it's not making above that bubble of noise. And I think bringing people together and having these conversations will kind of bring the awareness to the other innovations that are going on. And George mentioned some of them, like the graph engines kind of coming back into interest. I've talked to people who are really excited about expert systems again, back to expert systems, but using graphs to kind of formalize it so that you can update them more. So there's a lot of innovation. So that's kind of exciting to see. And then I guess with my background, I'm always interested in graph analytics and graph algorithms. And part of that is in this world today where we're focused on predictions and, how can I make a better prediction? I think it's very important for us to look at our data and our networks and try to understand them better. So it's really cool to know what's going to come next. But I feel like it's even more important for people to understand their customers, their patients, the context of the banking system, whatever it is, in its entirety versus just what's the next prediction. So I feel like that. So I'm excited to see more, in the analytics side to look at the understanding. And I'm also excited in along that same vein on whether we're going to see people talking about causal graphs as well. So it's really cool, again, to predict something. It's nice to introduce it, to understand it. But what if we could understand why things happened? What's caused something? Again, then if we could do that, then possibly we could promote better outcomes. So those are kind of the themes that I'm super excited about. And I'm just looking forward to hearing how people are thinking about it, the new research that's coming out, because there's just a new paper every day. I can't really hardly keep up. And then how companies are actually, applying these things. So that's me in a nutshell. That's what I'm super excited about.
Great. Thanks, Amy. And just taking the opportunity before I quickly switch to Paco to correct myself, because you're right, I didn't actually mention the third day. So December 13th, it's going to be what you aptly call the Creative Chaos Day. So the idea there is that we're going to have like a few sessions in which we're going to be wrapping up everything that's happened in the previous couple of days. So we're going to have workshops and panels. We're going to have unconference sessions. We're going to have networking sessions, and just taking it easy and letting everything sip in and making connections. That's the overall idea for day 3. So with that said, thank you again, Amy, and over to you, Paco.
Thank you, George, and wonderful, very well said, Amy. I'm thrilled about the range of topic areas and the people coming in, especially the networks that we have, but the people coming in and showing different areas of work in graph. It's just really picking up so much more over the past few months, obviously because of interest in AI. But I think beyond that, I'm also seeing that there's a lot of recognition of connected data and the importance. Frankly, I think that when it comes to graph applications, I'm finding more and more in cases where people really can't talk about it much because it's a sensitive application. And so I think it's important to elevate these kinds of tools and technologies because I think in some ways they're inherently understated. I work for a company called Sensing, and I help build out the knowledge graph practice. Sensing does entity resolution, and you probably have never heard of us, but most people, at least on the US or North American side, most people have probably interacted and used our software somewhere. About 60% of our work is air gapped, so it's in highly sensitive environments. But on the other hand, we have like one little library. So we work through partners, and we're partnering with most of the people on the panel here with their respective, not all, but most of respective employers. So I'm very interested in knowledge graph construction. This is a lot of where we work with people, or with system integrators and OEMs and whatnot. This area of getting to high quality data, and then how that propagates downstream in AI applications, understanding quality issues, how you can catch them, how you can do merge and unmerge of entities, and derive patterns from that. On the other hand, a lot of the work where we're at involves understanding patterns in graphs, like topological patterns. And these are not always the same thing as queries. It's somewhere in between what you can do with GraphML and what you can do with queries. And so that's another area I'm very interested in. And for what it's worth, I came into this through natural language. I sort of made the mistake of studying AI in grad school about 40 years ago and got involved in a topic called neural networks. So it's been a very long journey, but I'm thrilled to see all the folks here. And I will turn over. How about Andrea? Can I pass the baton to you?
Sure. Thanks. It was great that we saw each other just a few months ago in New York. I listened to your talk, at least. I don't know if you remember me, but anyway. So yeah, what am I excited about? A lot of things, really. Let's start to look at a few areas that I'm primarily focused on. Of course, I'm Andrea. I'm a CEO and co-founder of a startup soon to become a scale-up called WordLift. We work a lot with knowledge graph in conjunction with generative AI for helping companies automate content marketing tasks, improve semantic SEO. So we typically measure the success of a case by looking at the increase in traffic. So we model data in the knowledge graphs starting from schema traditionally, because that's kind of the linked data vocabulary that search engine use. But last year, as we started to interact more with language model, we found out that we needed more attributes. And so we started to expand schema, and we started to look back at ontology that I have long forgotten. And now they became very helpful tools for helping me direct this language model and create content for brands like Ray-Ban or Coca-Cola around the world in different languages. And so I found the use of the ontology again, and so I fell in love again with the idea that we model data. And of course, I'm into these, as many of you, I'm sure, into this graph RAG. A large trend. I mean, we've been building graph RAG since now over a year and a half. And of course, there is a lot of different ways in which you can implement a graph RAG. But reality is that I see very little attention to data modeling. And so I'm very much focused and interested in understanding, okay, how do we model data? What is the structure that data should have if I have to answer these queries coming from users on Google, or these queries coming from user on a chatbot? So again, the question it's a way to structure data, but it's not the only way. So that's one topic, like data modeling for. And maybe, kind of what is the new version of the ontology? How should we build these ontologies now that we have language models that can help us to the task? The other interesting aspect, of course, is, I think the role of memorization is becoming more important. People are starting to look at knowledge graphs, or at least I see them as a long-term memory for an AI system. But what does that mean? How do we structure memory, in a knowledge graph? How do we make sure that as the user interacts, we're kind of storing triples into this graph, and make sure that these kind of self-awareness arise from the graph data that we store as people interact with the system. We know that there is this fancy term that I like to now explore, which is metacognition. What does it mean? I mean, can a knowledge graph brings a new level of metacognition? Can we provide some ways of understanding more of what's going on in the system? And of course, I think we're all pretty much behind the hype of LLMs. We're kind of everyone is kind of focusing on, okay, what do we practically do? And I'm very big fan of one work on exploring how knowledge graph can be better in augmenting language models, for example, when running SQL queries. I mean, these are very practical use case that shows how we can make it better, and we do pretty much the same. I mean, how can I demonstrate that a graph RAG gets better? But then the next step is, how can we structure data so that the application become somehow aware of what's going on? And so these are kind of the topics that interest me the most, I think. And I will pass it to Juan, because I mentioned his work, and I'm a big fan of his work.
And also because it seems like this is the turn we're turning, kind of, left to right, as people saw here in the gallery.
All right, can you all hear me?
Yep.
Good. All right. Well, thank you so much. I'm really excited to be part of this group here. So my name is Juan Cicada. I'm the principal scientist and the head of the AI lab at Data.World. We're an enterprise data catalog, metadata management, all on a knowledge graph. Kind of been that from the beginning. I've particularly been in the graph space almost 20 years, probably since 2005, I think. I started in the semantic web world, and that is my home base. I'm an academic. But I also do startups and been in industry, like to go back and forth. And my primarily work that is dear to my heart is on the integration of relational databases with all these semantic technologies and knowledge graphs. I mean, that was actually my PhD, and I wrote a book with Aura Lacilla, right, designing and building enterprise knowledge graphs from relational databases, which is now super exciting, because now with all the LLMs and everything, a lot of the work that we started doing was, hey, these LLMs, they don't have the context of your organization. And where does that context live? That lives in your knowledge graph, in your data catalog and stuff. So we were doing all those experiments, and that was the benchmark that we put out last year that kind of really got popular, and a lot of other vendors were replicating it and reproducing that work. So that's what I'm really excited about, how all the vision and everything that so many people in this community have been trying to go do and been talking about it and showing it, but probably not getting all the spotlight that we deserve. Well, now we're getting all that spotlight because of LLM. So this is really kind of our time to really shine, and it is a huge opportunity. So that's what I'm really excited about that. And I'm also the co-host of Cataloging Cocktails, the Honest No BS data podcast. So I just want to throw that out there. So for the conference, I like to think, we always say we focus on the problem from a technical perspective, and we need to have more of a social technical perspective. So I look at this from a people, process, and technology side. From a people side on the conference, I am super excited of just connecting with other people and get everybody connected. And I always say I love to go meet friends and also make new friends. And I think that's the opportunity for all of us, for everybody attending to this. On the process side, I would love to go start hearing more and learning more about how folks are actually putting these systems together. Don't just talk about the technology. I mean, we want to hear about the technology for sure, but also like, what is a process to set this up? And actually, who are the people that need to be involved? Like, what are the new types of roles that we need to have? I think that's something really important that I think we don't focus too much. And obviously on the technology, I really love that we'll be able to see what systems people are building, but also the innovation. Let's go push the boundary. I really love that. And on the unconference side, one of the things I want to go through out there is that we always hear the success stories. We always hear what's working and everything. Honest, no BS. We need to talk also about what's not working. Because let's go make sure that don't reinvent the wheel by wasting time, and let's make sure that we're learning from each other, from not just what's working, but also what's not working. So really excited about this community putting all these things together. And yeah, let me throw it now to, I see Heather on my screen here. Hey, Heather.
Well spotted. On to you, Heather.
Yeah. needed to unmute. Okay, thanks, Juan. So I'm Heather Hedden. I'm a senior consultant with Enterprise Knowledge, a consulting company, and I've only been with them since January, although I've had ties with them since the beginning of that company. I was previously with Semantic Company, the member pool party, when I was spoke at Connected Data London and the online version in 2021. I'm newer to the graph space, but I have been in the semantic area and linked data and content for quite some time. As you know, we talk about vocabularies, taxonomies, thesauri, ontologies. So, you know, when I'm thinking about just even the name of the conference, connected data, it's not just connecting data to data. I'm interested in connecting data to content, or content to data, because content is what's tagged with taxonomies and thesauri. And what's interesting, I was just thinking about with the rise of LLMs and AI, generative AI, I meant, it's often to create content. You know, you put into generative AI and you get a long paragraphs, not data. So this is, I think, renewing an interest in, well, what kind of content is there and how are we connecting that too? With ontologies and knowledge graphs, obviously we can connect data and content together. And so the users, whatever you want to call them, people who are looking for answers are getting, it's not data or content, it can be together in the same subject domain and answering questions. Sometimes people are starting with data, but then they could get a longer piece of text or other images that are content, or sometimes people start with content and then they can get specific data too that's relevant to their content, because I know people come from both directions. So that's really the connectedness that's great. Now it's been kind of on the side of knowledge graphs. I'm not really delving into creating them myself. My colleagues do that, and I'm not trying to get that level of expertise that my colleagues have, but I'm supplementing this area with the semantics of taxonomies and thesauri, which can be more extensive and nuanced than some people might think. So I've offered training on that. And so what I've often done at conferences, and I might be doing at this one, is a masterclass, again, on focusing more on the taxonomies and how they connect. But it's nice to reach different audiences and speak with different people. There was another conference in the different end of the semantic space, taxonomies, that also started up in London in 2016, and that was Taxonomy Bootcamp London. It's one of the CAM World conferences, and I had been going every year to London, 2016, 17, 18, 19. And that one still has not returned to be in person, though. They have a little online version, which is great, in small parts a couple of times a year, and I've participated in that. So it would be nice to come to London in person again. I'm not entirely sure it will fit in my schedule. I just have to think about my work obligations, but I'm hoping it will.
We hope so too, and there's plenty of time to think about it and make your travel arrangements. So
right,
hopefully,
and if I have to, I'll deliver it virtually. I think that's a possibility for a masterclass.
Well,
so
great. Thank you. And I guess next one is line would be Panos, from
yes,
live.
I would suggest Panos, and I just listened to you yesterday with your LinkedIn talk, which is quite nice.
Yes, thank you. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, yeah. So thank you very much for the invitation. Yeah, my name is Panos Alexopoulos. I come from Greece. I know George actually almost 20 years now. Back in the first company I was working for, IMC Technology, a startup working with ontologies in an era that these technologies were very alien still. And currently I work as a head of ontology at TextKernel. It's a Dutch company that builds software for matching CVs and jobs together in an intelligent way. And there I lead a team that builds a large knowledge graph about the labor market domain, conceptualizing knowledge about skills, professions, qualifications in multiple languages and multiple industries. As I said, I work in the field for around 18 years, both in academic settings and in industries, in industry, also with many hats: practitioner, developer, educator, teacher. And the experiences and most importantly frustrations that I have accumulated all these years in this field led me in 2020 to write a book with O'Reilly about semantic data modeling. Yeah, Paco knows that very well. And since then, I also started developing and delivering training courses for professionals in the field. Regarding the Connected Data London, I'm really happy that it's back, stronger. It has been a great event. I think I was in London in 2019 or 2018, I don't remember right now. It was a great event there, and I think this year will be even stronger. What I'd like to say is that what I expect from this event and from the audience is that I'm looking for two types of audiences. Two types of participants. The first, which I expect will be the majority, are those that already are convinced about the value of semantic technology, about knowledge graphs, ontologies, etc. But they seek insights and guidance on, first, how to convince their bosses. That can be very hard to do, especially now with the LLMs. And second, how to make their jobs much easier. So this is something that I'm looking really forward to help with by masterclasses, by talks, by discussions, etc. The second audience, which I hope gradually will become even bigger, is those that are not so much convinced yet and still see semantic technologies as redundant, as inefficient, and as unscalable. So something that it's not really, doesn't give you a good ROI. So there, I will definitely be pretty happy with all of you, of course, together to show this audience, okay, what they are missing. That's it. Okay, I have to pick someone, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Me.
Rose.
Thank you. Okay, Rose.
I think you're muted. Rose.
You're muted.
Can you hear me okay? Yes. I'm new to the world of graph database and semantic tech, but I'm very excited to meet all the heavyweight lifters like yourselves. Very excited about the 2025 December edition of Connected Data London, and really happy, hope to see it grow and scale internationally in the future. I've been with Connected Data London now from the start of the year, January, and really getting tech savvy, learning from the best. George, James, all these platforms, webinars, podcasts. It's incredible how much educational content Connected Data produce, and it's first class. And in my previous roles, I've worked for over 15 years in corporate events for blue chip companies. I worked for YouTube, organized events for airlines and aviation industry, Emirates, San Francisco International Airport. I worked for Dubai Electric Vehicle Show. So now really excited to be working in a tech field, and I'm responsible for event management, planning. So my job is to ensure smooth running of connected data, and any issues come to me and I'll make sure you have the best experience and you come back in 25. Thank you. I choose Giuseppe.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Rose. I'm really excited to be here and to be part of this amazing group. Just a couple of information about me. My name is Giuseppe Furia, and I've been working for more than 10 years in the graph domain. I usually worked at the intersection of different technologies, including knowledge graphs, large language models, and graph neural networks, both in academia and the industry. And regarding the academia, I have a PhD in computer engineering. I remember my thesis that was focused on the automatic building of knowledge graphs. And I am afraid to say that this thesis would be completely different if I write it now, right? Due to the extremely change bringing by LLMs. I'm also co-author of a book entitled Knowledge Graphs Applied for the Manning publication. And I'm really excited about this event, CDL24, because I think that there is a really interesting balance between well-established application and processes, including very well-established domain, right? Like including the medical domain, the media, and so on. But I believe that there is a lot of space for this new application domain, including intelligence. For instance, Paco mentioned this task of entity resolution in which you have to reconciliate multiple pieces of information stored in different databases, right? And this is a typical use case in which knowledge graph can have a huge impact, especially in the intelligence domain. And I think that there are also really interesting opportunities to see what's next, right? So basically, George mentioned this idea of neural symbolic AI, that I think it will have a huge impact in the future. Or Amy mentioned this notion of causal AI, right, which can play a fundamental role in the interpretability of the models. So I believe that there is a huge amount of content and people and experts. So it's a wonderful opportunity having them all together in the same place and in the same time. So I would leave the stage to Ivo, I think.
Yeah, it's the only choice left. So Ivo, you go.
That's a good thing to say in the only choice. I'll, in the interest of the time, I'll try to be very short. My name is Ivo Verichkov, and I'm an independent consultant and a trainer. My work is mainly in guiding projects utilizing semantic technologies. I've been doing that for over 13 years out of 27 in IT. And my interest is all kinds of knowledge graphs, the public, corporate, and personal. Most work is in corporate enterprise knowledge graphs. And it seems now it's difficult to talk about data without mentioning LLMs. So I'll finish with that. So LLMs, I think, are exciting and playful, but sometimes I wonder where the adults in the room. And I'm hoping they'll hang out all in London this December.
Great. Thank you. And well, we're actually time-wise, we're a bit over the halfway mark, but well, like I said, there's many of us and I knew this was going to take a while, but it's fine. You can consider it as being kind of halfway through this event. And we already have a couple of questions, so I'm going to pass on the first one, and whoever feels like addressing it, just feel free to jump in. So there's a question from Jeffrey who's saying that discussions are typically around focused on a knowledge graph, singular. But the question is, should we maybe be discussing knowledge graphs, plural, since the connective tissue embodying knowledge is geometrically complex, when attempted in a singular implementation? I have to say it's a bit of a complex question. I'm not entirely sure I've gotten it right, but if some of you has a creative interpretation of that question that they feel like addressing, go ahead. My interpretation would be mostly, I guess, around how do you maybe reconcile different knowledge graphs for different domains, and I don't know.
I'll throw in actually a reference to Tom Smoker. Whitehow has a fairly good description about this, and I'm seeing it emerging elsewhere as well. When we talk about LLMs, we can say in knowledge graph terms, they tend to be rather open world. LLMs will try to piece together facts and come up with a narrative, generate some syntax, and you end up often with hallucinations. I think that this question here speaks to the idea that we should probably be focusing on domains and more of a closed world, perhaps in some use cases. that are specific to domains so that they can be validated, verified, so that we get the right kind of facts for a particular domain. And I mean, I see this a lot in terms of knowledge graph modeling, the domain modeling, and other people here can speak better to it. But I think this idea, especially when we get into AI agents, becomes very salient, that you can't really rely on just having one model or one graph that does everything. You really do want to have domain specifics and probably take a plurality of them in ensembles. We see this with mixtures of experts in AI is very powerful. And I think with agenics, we see this increasingly.
Mm-hmm. And Paco, I'll just add that I'm also seeing a correlation in so I agree with what you said, and I think that the multiple different domains, sometimes there are sub knowledge graphs, I think, that have to be taken into consideration, and there's a corollary to some of the emergent behavior research that's going on about emergent frameworks. So you can have different domains that are subdomains of something at a more abstract level. And the coordination of those different levels or hierarchies of information themselves look like a knowledge graph. So you have a kind of an uber meta knowledge graph, and then you have the sub, with possibly different domains or just for privacy reasons. For instance, policing or investigations, that have to be kept separate or siloed, but you want a hierarchy of that information abstracted for other investigations. So I think that's when we were talking about multiple knowledge graphs, I'm like, well, yes, of course, you need to coordinate and work with those together. But the actual coordination of them, again, looks a lot like another knowledge graph with rules and regulations kind of built in as well. So I would say, yes, we should be talking about them.
Anyone else want to jump in on this one?
Yeah.
Or?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I think this has to do with an old question, I think, which in ontology world, it's about modularization, in the sense that even within a single organization, but which, however, is quite big, you don't necessarily want all the parts of your knowledge graph to be handled by one entity. You may want to have it in a distributed way. And the technique for that is to really split them into modules that can be independent or semi-independent, because the thing is that as you split things and as you assign responsibility, you make the probability that something will diverge even higher. So, and another thing that I want to note is that the definition of a domain is also a bit problematic. It's not a very well-defined concept, right? So, for instance, if you talk to people, will say, if I ask each of you which is your domain, someone will say, I work in the finance, I work in biology, I work in, I don't know what else, let's say, human resources, for example. But for example, if you see the knowledge graph that we have for the labor market, it covers 20, 50 domains, because jobs are all in these domains, but very narrow when it comes to the types of concepts. So in that sense, if you ask me what is the domain of my knowledge graph, right, I would say it has an overlap with other knowledge graphs, because we have concepts about biology, about finance, about computer science and IT. But it's not easy to say that I have this domain and another knowledge graph has a different domain. So even a taxonomy of domains can be difficult. And I think it can go quite philosophical. But from a pragmatic perspective, I think that the answer to the question of Jeffrey is that in your situation, you have to define a scope. And the question then becomes, in your scope, how many knowledge graphs and how many modules you want to have? What is the optimal way? And this is something to be seen in that context. You cannot a priori say, I want one or two. It has to do with governance. It has to do with the size and the complexity of the situation. That's it.
I just want to add, that's the whole process part, the people part.
Yeah.
This is why all of this is not just a technology problem.
There's this kind of old saying in it was usually meant to apply for in the software engineering domain, something that goes like, well, your software architecture is going to end up reflecting the structure of your organization. But I wonder if that also applies to your knowledge graph architecture.
Also, I believe that if you really well unify identity, structure, and semantics, then this difference knowledge graphs is not so significant, because this is an easy way to handle that.
Right. Have another question from Joseph. Joseph is asking, says, we see a lot of use cases of GraphRag in the market, but how do we quantify the quality of results returned using GraphRag, and how can knowledge graphs help there?
So I'll add, that's why we should do benchmarks. That's why we started doing that stuff too. So I think that's a really important thing, because everybody can go talk about the stuff. This is a system we're doing, but we should also kind of put some benchmarks out there. And then also, I think what's important, my pet peeve about benchmarks, we got many of these, but one is we try to overgeneralize because we have this one benchmark. So that's a big problem, because people start focusing on the benchmark, and then their goal is to beat the benchmark and not to go solve the problem. So got to be careful about benchmark. Well, I'm not saying we don't need them. We still need them, right? I just think it's very important to be able, how do we go talk about that, right? One of the famous benchmarks in the text to SQL space is Spider, an academic one that's doing that. People hit 98%. So you're saying that the problem is solved, right? It's like, no, it's far away. So the other thing is that we should also be careful when it comes to the benchmark is on the types of domains, right? We're doing it, right? So sometimes taking Evo's comment, we're the adults in the room, right? Well, if we're doing some benchmarks where it's just like this is documents about movies and we're doing that stuff. Okay, that's cool. That's cute stuff, very useful. But then very different if I'm looking at documents about my legal documents or stuff like that. So you have to be careful about it. So we should be very explicit about the types of benchmarks that we do in a particular domain, and what's important too is it's transparent about how we are reporting our numbers and stuff. I see people saying we hit 99% on this accuracy. Well, yeah, because we just selected the 10 questions out of the 50, right? And that's so you got to be very transparent. So I think at the end of the day, benchmarks are really important, and that's how competition is how we get people to advance. So I'm all for benchmarks, but we also got to be careful about how we go present these things.
I think here, if I can add a point here. We kind of lack still a map of the different implementation for GraphRag. I think that Paco was mentioning that. I mean, there is a lot of discussion of, GraphRag can actually solve some of the problem that enterprises are facing with the implementation of RAG. I think there was a paper just recently coming out that RAG is not a valid solution for enterprises these days, even though, it has had a lot of attention. And GraphRag seems to be interesting, and it is interesting from my personal experience. But there are so many different ways of doing that. From the creation of the graph to the query and the argumentation and the response, that I think a good work would be to map it out and kind of create classes of what a GraphRag really is. What type of GraphRag are you? And I think that's something that I would be very interested in pursuing.
I wanted to support that, Andrea. Like, this is spot on what you just said. I think that would be fantastic if somebody could go present their map, right? A taxonomy itself of what these is. And one of the things I want to go clarify now that we need more clarification. People use these terms are like, where is the sources coming from, right? Because a lot of these conversations are like, they start using GraphRag and they're assuming and implying that we're all talking about unstructured world, but then it's different if it's structured, right? So all these types of stuff need to be considered. So spot on. If somebody, what would be interesting too is having different perspectives. I'm seeing the world this way. Oh, I'm seeing the world this way, and figure out the match. So love this.
That would be great work to do. The other point that I have, which is not directly related, but somehow it is that I would love to see in a conference like this one kind of some of the AI guys, like the AI stack, because we're still kind of in our own niche, and it's a beautiful niche. I love it, right? We all love it. But where is LangChain with their LangGraph implementation? Where is Llama Index that has been so popular for on knowledge graph and potentially kind of spreading the word about it? I mean, can we bring them on? I mean, can we kind of look at this edition of the conference as a bridge between our beautiful world and this new exciting world of AI companies that are somehow starting to get closer to us? I mean, this is more for James and George, I guess, that have been more on the organizational side.
Yes, absolutely, Andrea. It's been on top of our list, and well, we don't have anything to announce just yet, but we hope that we'll have something to announce pretty soon. Just quick comment on your point about, well, this graph RAG taxonomy. The closest thing that comes to my mind is an article I saw published recently by Prashant Rao and Ben Lorica, in which they did like something like that. They sort of tried to map the different architectures. I don't know if I would go as far as to call it the taxonomy of graph RAG, but that's the closest thing that comes to my mind. And another point that, well, you also spoke about different ways of doing RAG, and that brought something else to mind. An article I was reading just yesterday, the main point of it was that, well, maybe if the purpose of building a knowledge graph for a specific application is to use it to do RAG, then, well, in that case, maybe a good idea would be to consider doing what the author called content-centric knowledge graph as opposed to an entity-centric knowledge graph. And that basically means that, well, instead of doing like, I don't know, named entity recognition and recognizing all the entities and all the relationships, maybe you should just, maybe it would make more sense if you just split your text in chunks that make coherent units and build your knowledge graph out of that. It seems like an intriguing idea, so I'm wondering if anybody
Well, I mean,
has
that's pretty much what we're also doing. I mean, because we're focused on content graphs as opposed to entity-centric graphs. But the reality is that there is always a blend between these two worlds. So if you want to, in most cases at least, it's not just content, but it's also structured data, organized in entities. So that's why I want to read these patterns analysis that you shared and try to see, if we can expand it.
I mean, it's an interesting time for considering implications on AI, and going back to what can we do with graphs. I think the biggest takeaway kind of goes back to something Amy mentioned a little bit earlier, but you do end up looking at graphs in different levels. You end up having different kinds of organizations which are in graph structures. It's not necessarily all the same graph. You might think of having a lot of really busy, noisy graphs at a low level and then sort of extracting up into something that's a little bit more coherent and useful for inference. But yeah, that discussion about, hey, we have a lot of domains and the domains themselves are organizing graphs. It does beg a question that we have to look at different levels when we talk about what is a graph. I think that one of the big takeaways in the current era of using neural networks and LLMs, one of the big takeaways is that it's good for some things, but not for others. So it's not the end all be all. There's a lot of other approaches on the horizon, like graph diffusion, for instance, which aren't necessarily the same as how people are doing with RAG. But we see that with RAG, it's very valuable to prevent hallucination in the sense of tying down possible answers to a particular set. We see that RAG suffers from the typical kind of problems you have in information retrieval with vector databases. They're really great for recommender systems, but they tend to give relatively shallow results because similarity is kind of a linear connection of data. It's not a real graph connection of data. But we also have some pretty sneaky techniques to be able to construct graphs out of vectors, vector database embeddings. And so this is where GraphReg is coming in. It's like, on the one hand, can we build out a graph to understand possible results to feed into the LLM? And then on the other hand, a lot of people are exploring, can the LLM create a more refined graph and then do downstream subsequent reasoning from it before you go on and give an answer? So I think part of the problem with GraphReg is that the graph may appear in various different parts of the architecture. People right now are putting it all under one umbrella, but it really does mean at least a half dozen different things.
Yeah. Thank you, Paco. That's a good point. Yeah. Okay, we have another question from Paul. Paul is asking, which are the most important issues when connecting knowledge graphs with the metadata of the library, PDFs, and a DAL, I'm not sure what a DAL is, multimedia, to deliver an answer and recommendation compiled by a chatbot? Guess at least my ability to comprehend the question is hampered by the fact that I don't recognize this DAL acronym, if anyone is familiar with it, or Paul, if you're listening, if you can help us.
I think it stands for digital asset management.
All right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, thanks, Paul.
Yeah.
Yeah, indeed.
I think the biggest issue in general, of course, is the fact that when you're trying to work with assets like PDFs, you have the metadata on the document itself, but the real issue is that the document needs to be chunked. And when you start to create the chunk from the document, you have to be very strong at co-referencing the entities within the chunks, and that's applicable to any form of long text, and it's even more applicable if you start going multimedia and or cross media, and you have to connect the PDF with the image or the information inside the table. Because of course the way in which current vector system works is by chunking the text, and so when you apply the graph, then you have to make sure that all these chunks are entity related, and that's, I think, that's the biggest issue at the moment that needs to be addressed for conversing with a PDF.
Yeah, I would actually imagine it's been a long while since I've had to parse a PDF. I don't know if the libraries out there have gotten any better, but I would actually imagine that parsing the PDF in the first place is actually not entirely
it's
trivial.
a lot better than 10 years ago. I was actually doing a project and I was looking at how complicated it was 10 years ago and how it's getting simpler. But the real problems remains how to handle the charts, the tables. PDF, it's rich on media typically. I mean, it's not just text. And so when you have to build a coherent structure, you need to understand all the different elements and kind of reconcile it with the right entities. And that still remains very, very challenging.
Yeah, and if I may add something about what Andrea mentioned, this idea of document chunking, it's fundamental, right? Especially for information extraction, because I noticed in my direct experience is that the capacity of these LLMs is expanding every month, right? So basically they are able to process thousands and thousands of tokens. But basically, the large is the document, the low is the quality of the extracted information, right? So sometimes it's better apply some post-processing after processing single chunks, right? In order to reconcile the entities, as mentioned by Andrea, because it's a bit tricky, right? Technically, there is this possibility of processing thousand of tokens in a single run, but actually the result in terms of information extraction is really low, at least in my experience.
No, totally agree. I mean, there is no way that currently with long text, long context LLMs, you can realistically chunk, a document and extract it. It's quite the opposite, actually. I mean, a smaller model, what they're called small model, small language model like P3 by Microsoft is actually doing a great job in data extraction, but it works with a smaller context window of I think 2,000 tokens.
Okay. We have another one from John, who's asking, what is the effect of adopting low semantics, that is informal taxonomies, in the cross-company interoperability? Is adopting informal technologies just a step to get to formal taxonomies, or is it just an overcomplication of everything and we should start directly with formal semantics? Yeah, that's a good one.
I can comment on that. I think that it's the former, right? So it depends actually what was before. So if let's say the initial situation is that you don't have any taxonomy, right? Or even simply keyword list, let's say. If you don't have that, or if you have, I don't know, 10 departments, 10 applications using the same different overlapping keyword list, by just creating a central one, even without any semantics, just a JSON file or just something very simple, is already a step ahead, a step forward. So that's my view. And actually trying to set up from the beginning, in my view, formal semantics to settings where there is not such a culture already, you will most likely get resistance. You will get like, come on, no, this is too difficult, right? Trying to that's my thing. It took me text kernel when I went. The initial ontologies, let's say that we have ontologies, taxonomies were just in XML, right? No RDF, no scores, no nothing. But the first thing that we did was not so much to transform those representations into RDF or into something more formal, but rather to gather all the resources together and say, look, we are going to take care of this. Stop doing this on your own. So it was first a governance issue, and of course, and then an improvement issue. That was my experience.
Okay.
And to add to that is like, just because you can doesn't mean you should, right? So it's understand what the problem is you're trying to go solve. And then you see and then not only what is the problem, it's like how some things are problems, but we live with problems, right? So then how painful is that problem? Do you have the resources to go solve that problem? Maybe you have some resources and you can't, and it's not enough. So you have to go find a short, easy way to go do it. And then later on, you have to show the value. So there's so many, again, it's all, my point here always is, it's not just about technology. If you want to put this in practice, we should definitely have the technology conversation, but if you really want to say, how do I do this in my organization? Do not focus just on technology. You have to understand the broader ecosystem context around the people and the process and how this ties directly to business value. But if we just want to have the geeky conversation about that's fun too.
Okay, I think I should address this because taxonomies come up.
Yeah.
When I did forget to mention in my introduction that I wrote the book, The Accidental Taxonomies. Okay, it's interesting. I haven't heard formal and informal being used as adjectives for taxonomies. I get it. That a formal taxonomy would be one that's built on semantic words, which would be SCOS, Knowledge Organization System. And as its name implies, it is simple. It's not as complex as OWL and RDFS with building ontologies. So, but you do see these non-SCOS taxonomies and control vocabularies being created in an organization. A formal idea generally using a taxonomy ontology system, or it could be the coping system. I wouldn't say that we should just go directly for formal semantics. I mean, when you're ready, that's great, but don't avoid creating control vocabularies here and there when they're needed. Often that is the building block towards creating the more formal taxonomies and other knowledge organization systems. And I think it's good because then they really reflect the reality of the subject domain within an enterprise, that it's coming up organically. That because it's being, there are many sources. That's really the question. When oncology maybe often there's a small top down to it, but taxonomies are built by a combination of bottom up and top down, and we'll be giving some presentations on that later this year. And this is kind of the bottom up that having informal control vocabulary.
I think at least a part of that conversation should be the consideration of, well, what's the actual purpose of your taxonomy or vocabulary or whatever it is that you want to call it. It's a different thing if you want to have something for a navigational purpose, for example, as a very typical use case, and a different thing if you want to have it for information retrieval or whatever other use case. So it's, I guess the answer, as always, comes down to it depends.
Yeah, because the question is about intercompany interoperability. So 2 points. One is it's worth having a look at what is happening in the automotive industry. I just shared something about Kitten X, and similar work is with the International Dataspace Association. I think overall semantics is not such a challenge, but there are challenges related to how to associate different policies over different parts of data, what kind of new protocols are needed for this kind of inter-company interoperability.
And I see a later question here: is a taxonomy using SCOS broader, narrower, perceived as formal semantics or informal? And as I said, I haven't generally heard those adjectives used with taxonomies, but with semantics, yeah, if it's following SCOS, I mean, I would say yes, it is. But it's more than just broader, narrower.
I guess you may call that formal semantics if it's SCOS formatted, but as you said, it can only have like broader, narrower relationships, and in that sense, it's you may be using like a formal semantics vocabulary, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're actually grounding it. You could be grounding it, but it's not necessarily the case, I think.
Yeah, if that's the only SCOS element involved, that there aren't alternative labels, there aren't notes, there aren't related concept and schemes and everything. Not
I'm surprised that SACL has not actually been brought into that conversation by anyone yet, because when we talk about like building knowledge graphs, usually somehow people tend to gravitate towards the two ends of the spectrum. So like either, I don't know, a full-blown all ontology semantics, or I don't know, very lightweight SCOS, or even no kind of formal vocabularies at all. And there's the middle ground, like SACL, which seems to be gaining in popularity lately. Has any of you had good or bad experiences using SACL?
Yeah, I'm using it daily, but that's maybe not so much related to this. Of course, you need this kind of tooling for exchange of business rules or for any kind of validation.
Yeah.
But beyond that, I don't consider it really so much a middle ground. It's more of a closed world approach for rule-based validation, not axiomatic validation.
Oh, someone is typing.
Sorry, Panos, you were saying?
Someone is typing.
Right, yeah, actually a number of people, because we're getting, we're like a couple of minutes away from well, even less than that, actually, maybe a minute away from wrapping up. And I think people are slowly kind of logging out. And I don't think we have any more questions to address, actually, from the audience at least. So it's a good time to call it a day, I guess. So thanks everyone for joining. It's been a real pleasure catching up with all of you. And well, we'll be back soon. First of all, we've been recording it, so we'll be sharing it with the world and with you as well soon. And we'll be in touch and with more news on what we're looking for in submissions and how things are going. We're going to be announcing a few more speakers soon, so there's plenty to keep ourselves busy. Thanks again, everyone, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye.